Okay, hello everybody, good morning and be welcome to this first session of our last webinar. Today it's Friday. So, well, what do you think if we start? So, well, first of all, good morning everybody, welcome, and please let me introduce to our today's speaker. So, Patricia López es licenciada en lengua inglesa. Actualmente se encuentra cursando la maestría en educación con orientación en innovación y tecnología educativa. Ha realizado varios cursos y certificaciones en estimulación temprana e inteligencias múltiples. Ha trabajado como curadora y docente en las instituciones privadas bilingües más reconocidas en las zonas de Ecatepec y Texcoco. Actualmente es CEO de su propia escuela de idiomas, así como docente de inglés desde bebés hasta adultos de todos los niveles y edades. Ha desarrollado el proyecto e investigación denominado Bilingual Baby, que abarca Bilingual Baby y Bilingual Toddler, a través de presenciales y online. Recientemente se encuentra trabajando en la investigación de la estimulación de la segunda lengua en la última etapa del embarazo. Además, se desarrolla como conferencista e instructora de maestros de inglés, fundadora y presidenta ex oficio del capítulo Texcoco de la Asociación Mexicana de Maestros de Inglés Mextesol y presidenta electa del Comité de Ética y Vigilancia del Comité Directivo Nacional de la citada asociación en el periodo 2023-2025. Así que, Patty, welcome, and this space is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. I am going to start sharing my screen. It is really nice to be here with you. Talking a little bit about this, the impact of a second language in toddlers' minds. In a previous talk, I was talking about this. As Lupita said, my name is Patricia Lopez, and I have been teaching English for more than 10 years. My first experience was with preschoolers. Little kids around 4, 5 years old with all the energy and all the eagerness to learn many things, new things every day, and not just related to the topics or to the subjects, but in general. It is amazing. It is really nice, but it is also tiring. Eventually, I started to graduate myself to other levels and started to teach in primary school, in coordinating primary, secondary, high school adults work, a lot of effort, patience, and they need interaction, contact, and solving doubts about life, not just about what we are talking about in the classroom. So it is kind of tiring, and we need a lot of devotion to our job, to the teaching philosophy, etc., to be able to transmit to these preschoolers all the knowledge and all the things that we want. Doing this teaching in formal schools also, involve a lot of administrative things that will be. But when we teach little kids, it is more the administrative work that we have to do, the material that we have to create, the monitoring that we have to do, the reports that we have to send, etc. But after some years, and after taking the adventure of opening my own language school, my language center, I started recalling all the experiences and differences between different ages, levels, and schools where I have had the opportunity to work. And I realized that the students of any age with the background of a bilingual education at any stage of their lives, if it is in the preschool, primary, whatever, they have better results in the comprehension, in pronunciation, and besides, the confidence in the production of the language, even the eagerness to learn, this thing of I like or I don't like English, I like or I don't like the subject, it is much, it is a great difference. I had the opportunity of research and observe students in different groups at my school, and the evidence was really clear. But what is the explanation then? We know that these little, or that these adults or that these teenagers had the opportunity to have a bilingual education in other stage of their life. And that gives them like this benefit or this advantage with the others. But why? What is the explanation to this? And besides, when we realize what is the difference, what can we do to reduce, to close that gap between one group of students and the other group of students? From the students that enjoy learning English and the other group that it is like, well, I have to, or someone else is telling me that I must do it, but they are not really convinced about it. The first thing we need to bear in mind is the concept of acquiring a second language or being bilingual. That is like in two different ways, acquiring a second language or being bilingual. According to one author that I was studying for the first talk that was Bilingual Baby, his name is Albert Costa, and you can find many books related to this. A bilingual person is who can communicate in a second language at any level, which means that all these schools that call themselves bilingual, even when they just give 1 or 2 hours of English a week, are not lying. But, well, we are not going to take literally that definition for this talk, because I think that being bilingual involves other things. For example, I would like to ask you, any of the participants of this talk, what do you think is being bilingual? Who can be considered as a bilingual person? If you want to open your microphone or you want to share in the chat, it would be nice to listen or to read your answers.
Maybe, good morning.
Good morning.
Maybe someone who is able to communicate in two languages?
Okay, someone who is able to communicate in two languages, different from the first definition that we saw. It is not at any level, but being able to communicate. Thank you. Another participation?
Yeah, it's like when you have enough knowledge of two languages, or when you have a high accuracy of the language, different from your mother tongue.
Okay, great. A high one. Yes, thank you. This is another one that is different from the first, no? Because Albert Costa says at any level. So little kids who can repeat chunks or can say hello and have a really, really short conversation, he can consider them as bilingual, and we are saying something different. Great, thank you. So well, let's take into consideration these three definitions that we have now, and let's go to a reality that we used to live a couple of years, more, but some years ago. Do you remember or have you heard about this moment when the companies used to measure employees in level, the English level of employees in percentages? Like you have it here on the screen, 41%, 50%. What is your level of English? And we used to say 80%, 70%, 60%. I think this is a nightmare for English teachers. And it is also a lie, because it would be like we are the same as saying that we are balanced bilingual. Balanced bilingual means that our productive and receptive skills are in the same level, and that our productive and receptive skills are near equal in both languages. And now we know that most people around the world know and use a second language in varying proportions. That's why we have these certifications divided by skill, and we can be proficient in one level from the Common European Frame of Languages in B2, for example, in speaking, and we have in the same exam, in the same certification, in listening, a big one. So we are never balanced bilingual. I can even consider that we are not even balanced in our own language, that we have a better performance when we speak or when we write, and maybe we are not so good listeners, or the other way around. So this is like not the correct way of measuring our accuracy or fluency in another language. We are not going to take this balanced bilingual concept into consideration, but we are going to go to the theory that leaves this out and classifies bilingualism in 3 different types. The first one is the compound bilingual. I am going to tell you the definition, and it is a person who develops 2 linguistic codes simultaneously as they begin to process the world around them. So, bilingual babies and bilingual toddlers. When we start thinking about kids in primary, for example, they are not really decoding the world around them. They are learning new things. And teenagers, well, they already have a lot of information in them. So compound bilingual, we can say that are these kids that are raised with 2 different languages. In this case, we are going to talk about English and Spanish. The second kind of bilingualism is the coordinate bilingual. That is this person who works with 2 sets of concepts, learning a second language outside in one environment. It could be at school, in the street, in the social surrounding, in their jobs, etc., and speaking the first language in their house with their family or the closest circle. So we can talk about those kids that maybe are studying in a bilingual school or in a different country, so they practice one language outside, and when they go home, they can practice the mother tongue. And the last one, that is a nightmare for teachers, I think, is the subordinate bilingual. Why am I saying this? Because they learn a second language through filtering it from the primary one, from the mother tongue. And this takes them many times to think that they have to translate or decode word by word, idea by idea, and that is like a constant request from teachers. Stop doing that. No, try to think in the second language. The ideas are not the same. We need like to talk a little bit about the culture of another country, etc. So, well, this is the most difficult, and we understand that this is because they are not in the let's say correct moment of acquiring the second language, the perfect, let's say, not the perfect moment for acquiring a second language. Now, well, let me go a little bit back. We need to set up and to explain these students and to have in mind that the objective of the acquisition of a second language is not like decoding, but accessing to the knowledge and to the information that we already have in our brains, but with a different language. Like I commonly use this example of having a Word document, for example. If it is set in Spanish and you write in French, it is going to mark everything underlined in red because it doesn't recognize those words, that spelling. But if you change the code to French, then it is going to be correct. So that's what we have to do, like to change the chip and not just decode word by word or the ideas that we are giving them. Well, now we know that the brain is divided in 2 hemispheres, while the left one is devoted to analytical logical processes and the right one to emotional social one. The language involves both of them. The concept of lateralization takes relevance in this moment because you know that lateralization develops gradually with age, but more importantly, in the critical period hypothesis and the sensitive period hypothesis. In this case, we can say that a little baby, that a little toddler that is learning English has the whole experience of the language. They can identify the words, but they can express their emotions or identify the emotions like a whole, because they are using the both hemispheres. And when we work with grown-ups, then they are going to have one or the other. We can't have like both at the same time. Most of the time, sadly, it is going to be the left one. So we don't feel like connected to the language. We can't talk about emotions, like honestly, talking from our second language, because we are trying to be accurate, to analyze everything, to use our reason, and we go mostly to the left part of the brain. Talking about the theories that I was mentioning that are explaining this better, we talk about the critical period hypothesis in the acquisition of a second language versus the sensitive period hypothesis in the acquisition of a second language. This is pretty interesting, and I am going to talk a little bit about the first one, but this is not the one that we are going to follow because, well, listen a little bit about it. This is studied and proved, or with a lot of experiments, with these two situations that you can identify on the screen. The first one is a feral kid. When the feral kids that are raised by animals, that are in the jungle, that are far away from society, and they achieve to survive, are recovered, are found, and they are integrated to society when they are toddlers, when they are little kids, they can learn how to speak. They can learn how to communicate and how to name things. And, well, they are going to have a delay in the development if you compare them with kids their age that have been into that society since they were born. But they can learn. If you find a person with these conditions when they are teenagers or adults, it is impossible. They can learn how to interact, how to, or what things to eat, and other things, other features around. But they can't learn how to speak. So that's the critical period hypothesis, that if we don't learn a language during our first period of life, from 0 to 8 years, 6 years, 7 years, depending on the person, then we are not going to be able to do it. We are here as English teachers because we want to know, like, and to have more tools on how to be better at giving this knowledge to our students. So obviously this is a good theory for us, because that would mean that our students can learn if they are not in that period, and you know that is not true. But, well, that the other experiment is the brain injury. If there's a brain injury in this first stage of life, or these two first stages of life, then they can recover these functions that are devoted to transmit our speech in a natural and life. That is not possible. So that is the base of the critical hypothesis in acquisition of a experience, thinking, but feeling, and bringing these two is going to be just one of the hemispheres. A clear example of the difference between the types of bilingualism can be asking a 6-year-old, for example, who is in contact with the second language, with English in this case, and with math, with basic knowledge of math. 2 plus 2. And that little kid is going to answer immediately 4. As long as this kid knows, as we mentioned before, a little bit of math. But if you ask this to a grown-up in a basic level who is like, oh, I don't know, English is so difficult, I don't know if I'm going to learn, and maybe they start and they stop and they start again and they stop again. If you ask them, even when they have obviously this knowledge, this information, and they know the basic English language to translate and to do this, they are going to take that equation to the part of the brain that translates. They are going to take it to 2 más 2. They are going to answer 4 and then go back and translate to English to 4. A lot of mental processes that are not necessary, that a bilingual brain can do immediately. So that could be like taking everything like together, the difference between a compound bilingual and a subordinate bilingual, and the difference when we have involved the whole brain in the language process or just part of it. When talking about a bilingual brain, we don't only talk about lexis. We talk about many features around. We talk about phonetics, that is the base of our program of the theory of bilingual toddler, because we work with the phonemical mapping of the kids. If they listen, any sound that they listen in the first 6 months of life, from 4 to 6 months, again, depending on the baby, it is going to be like a natural sound, like a mother tongue sound. So if we want a baby to speak in the future, or to have the opportunity to speak Chinese, Japanese, German, French, English, whatever, even when the parents don't speak those languages, we can expose them to these videos or series or movies or anything that they can listen to, because that is going to be part of their phonemical mapping. If we go to toddlers or to little kids, then the repetition, the acquisition, like every day, it is going to work for them in a similar way. It is not going to be like them, part of their map, but it is going to be easier for them to reproduce and to speak. So even when they don't talk about or they don't produce these sounds during a long period in their life, when they are exposed to this and when they are asked to pronounce a word, it is going to be much better. Then we have the structures that obviously we don't teach like a formula or to follow, an example and repeat it with little kids, but using the chunks and giving long sentences as we are mentioned to do it in early stimulation with little kids. It is better because you are giving them like the whole sentence, like the whole idea, and they can understand what is the pattern that they have to follow, and it is going to be much easier in the future. Then we have the rhythm. It is very interesting to study this and understand different theories and different ideas that come. And if you are interested in this, I would suggest you to look for the music of the languages. There are many authors that talk about it. There are a lot of videos in YouTube. In fact, there is a series in Netflix that is called Babies. And there is one episode that is called My First Words or First Words, something like that. And they talk a little bit about the rhythm, the music of the language. In one of the talks of Bilingual Baby, a teacher that was also a mother and wanted to start teaching the little baby English asked me, my family speaks Portuguese sometimes. So I am really scared. I am anxious about teaching this baby Portuguese and English, because I think Portuguese is pretty similar to Spanish. So how can he identify when we are talking in Portuguese and when we are talking in Spanish? And I know that now that I am mentioning this language, it comes to your mind, no? Like the pronunciation of certain words. So even when also Italian, the words can be pretty similar. The rhythm of the language, since the first two words that a Brazilian person starts speaking, you can identify that is Portuguese. An Italian person, you can say that is Italian. You are maybe not understanding what they are saying or the message that they are trying to get across, but you can identify the rhythm that they are using. So that's why this image, because the rhythm, I think that can be better explained as this, as the music of the language. And then the intonation that we give, because as we were saying, the two parts of the brain are pretty important. So, in English and in Spanish, we don't have so many differences. The way we ask a question in the intonation that we give when we ask a question in Spanish is the same intonation that we give when we ask a question in English. But there are other things that culturally have to be taught, or not taught, but modeled to little kids for them to be understood and to understand the mood of the other person. What is he trying to say? If he is asking for something, or if he is excited, angry, whatever. So we have to take all these things into consideration. We have to bear in mind that the bilingual brain is not just different from a monolingual one in the way that it works, that is everything that we have been mentioning now, but also with the how can you can look at it. Here you can see two different images, and this is because of the brain or neuronal connections that are specific for language, and that they grow faster, but not just that, they grow in a different way, creating more connections in a bilingual brain. It is said that a brain can be bilingual at any stage of life. But if we start since the beginning, then this lateralization, the plasticity, and all the building of the neuronal connections are more efficient and can give us much more benefits than just the language. These brains are more efficient in executive functions. The executive functions are the memory, and they are cognitive flexible, which allows change our attention from one task to another if it is needed. So we have a better reaction if someone is something is happening, like an emergency, for example. But also this switching from one language to other is easier for them because of the cognitive flexibility. They are also brains that can establish priorities in a better way, that can respond to different demands at the same time, and that have much more tools to flexibility, tolerance. And well, as we mentioned at the beginning, there is not just that they learn another language, but they have to know a little bit about another culture. So they start being tolerant in many ways, not just because of the neuronal connections, but also because they are learning that there are other persons in other parts of the world that maybe have different traditions or customs, whatever, but that are similar to us, and that is okay, no? That is something that we are going to talk a little bit about in a couple of minutes. Like, how can we improve this, or start working with our babies or our toddlers in an effective way, no? The physical changes are consequence of these tools that I was telling you, and the understanding and decoding of the world that surround us, or that surround them, in this case to babies and to toddlers. And they have better performance in cognitive processes, such as perception, the memory, attention, emotion, and reaction to those emotions. Here you have the 4 cognitive processes that I mentioned before: perception, memory, attention, and emotion. And I was telling you also the reactions to these emotions. So, well, here is where we start with the program that I was mentioning before. That is the the outcome of a couple of researches. The first research was bilingual baby, and we were studying kids from the day they are born to 2 years, 11 months, more or less. And we had a really successful program teaching them in presential lessons and online, because it started from pandemic. They are able to follow instructions. This is something really interesting for parents and for teachers, because it is pretty difficult for show that they know what we know, that we have been teaching them, that they have been working with, etc. And talking about babies or talking about toddlers, well, it is even more difficult, because they don't even know how to speak Spanish, or not correctly, or the maturity of their mouth, of their all the system to speak is not mature enough. So they don't have like this proficiency to pronounce certain things. But we have to be patient and understand that what we are doing is working with the phonemics, with the phonetical map, and that we are working with like this flexibility of the brain and giving them an input, talking about this silent period that all of us have. But in the case of babies, it's like years that they are going to take to speak and to produce and to show that they are learning and that they have advanced in this. And in this moment, we are working with bilingual toddlers from 3 years to 5 years, 11 months. And that is more going with these ages or stages from SEP, because when they are 6, they go to primary school. So, well, now they are considered as kids, and they can need and other things, like, for example, a subordinate bilingual, no? Like more extra stimulus, or maybe vocabulary, learning with games, with music, etc., but in a different way. That when we talk about toddlers. So when in this moment, I am going to tell you a little bit about this program from 3 years to 5 years, 11 months, more or less. That can also be effective for kids of 6 or 7 years, depending on the level of maturity. The first thing that we have to take into consideration that has to be involved in this program, let's say, in this way of teaching them a second language or a third language, is the environment. The first idea is to create an environment to be used as the trigger of switching. There are a lot of bilingual schools that are big enough to have, for the same group, 2 classrooms. So, for example, or there are 2 groups, no, in 2 different classrooms. But one classroom is the English classroom and the other classroom is the Spanish classroom. And sometimes, well, at the middle of the day, when they have like the break, they change after the break, they change the things from one classroom to the other. And I have listened to a lot of parents saying, why? They have to put everything in the school bag again and carry everything and go to another place and sit in a different place. Why don't the teacher change and that would be easier? Yes, that would be much easier. Like it doesn't involve any effort for the kid, but the environment is what we are trying to switch. When they go from the Spanish to the English classroom, then the environment is totally different. For example, in October, November, in one classroom, they can see Day of the Dead and the offerings and all these things. And the other one, they can see something related to Thanksgiving, to Halloween. And since there, the culture that we were saying is different. In one classroom, they listen to music that is sung in English, and in the other one in Spanish. My teacher speaks in one language, my teacher speaks in another one. So that switching is pretty important. There are other schools that are smaller. They just have one group per grade. So what they do is like wear a hat, a bracelet, a shirt, something that makes this a visual change for the little kid from one language to another one. There are others that just start like with their routine. I have a hello song, for example, and they always sing the same hello song. So what I suggest to the moms of these toddlers or of these babies when they are going to train at home is to play the song. So the brain immediately recognizes that moment and says, okay, this is the moment where we speak English. Even when the parents don't speak English, with all the tools that we provide them, they can start teaching them and learning maybe at the same level that the kids are learning. The second tip or the second thing that we have to take into consideration is lexis. The words is, well, like the first thing that they are going to start repeating as they do in the mother tongue. And it is always increasable. This is important because it is like the first demonstration that they are going to give us about learning. But it is not the most important because every day we learn new language in our own language. So this is increasable every day. And this can be motivated by memory with the use of chunks, drilling, and of course, with rhymes and songs. What you see on the screen is a phrase from Glenn Doman. It says, any child has, at the time of birth, greater potential intelligence than Leonardo da Vinci in his life. And Glenn Doman is the creator of reading technique that is called Doman method. Doman method is on fashion because a lot of famous artists with a certain size. So when they see this word like doll, the one that you have on the screen, they have listened so many times to that word and they see like the image or they see like the letters that they can repeat doll. But it is just like the memory of that glimpse of the word. We work with Doman method, but not for them to memorize. It is just like we don't follow like the whole method step by step because we don't want them to memorize the words in English. We just want them to realize different